Hearing none, is there a motion to moved in second? Without objection, it's approved. Item number 4, please, Mr. Lombardo.
Item number 4 is a request from LSU Real Estate and Facilities Foundation to find an acceptable university purpose for a pre-development agreement with 1532 Tulane Partners Incorporated for the Charity Hospital Redevelopment Project Center. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Dan Lazell.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Mr. Woods, members of the board. As you may remember, in September of 2017, the board approved an intent to lease between the university and the LSU Real Estate Facilities Foundation to explore the redevelopment of the Charity Hospital property in New Orleans. As is highlighted in the board resolution itself, there has been an extensive process since that point, or since then, to get to this point, which is really bringing, after a very lengthy competitive process, a pre-development agreement with 1532 Tulane Partners for your consideration for approval. This is not the final approval that will come to the board. That will be a lease document that will be brought back to the board for consideration and approval 6 to 12 months from now. At this point, I would like to invite Mr. Rob Stewart and Mr. Jimmy Moran, who are with the LSU Real Estate and Facilities Foundation, to come up and make some remarks. We also have our consultant with Jones Lang LaSalle here to take us through a presentation on the project, as well as the development team. So with that, I will turn it over to Rob and Jimmy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Rob Stewart. I'm the chairman of the Real Estate Facilities Foundation and the immediate past chair of the LSU Foundation. And we've been working over the past year and a half to make sure that this is a very transparent process, that we do seek public input. We've had a number of meetings. We've been very transparent in the selection of developers, almost to the point of coming close to competitiveness. But we feel very good about what we've accomplished, what we've done here. We've had the support of the administration. Commissioner of Administration Jay Darden has been a member of our project management committee and very involved in the ultimate selection process. Jimmy Moran is going to take you through our process. As Dan said, we have JLL, which is probably the world leader in procurement consulting for public universities, who has worked with us closely in the process, as well as representatives of the 1532 Tulane, which is the selected developer, who will provide you some updates on timing, as well as the continued seeking of public input as they work to put together the ultimate final project and final lease that will come back to you hopefully in 2019. So with that, I will turn it over to Jimmy.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing us to bring this project forward. A little brief history, particularly for some of the newer members to the board. About 20 months ago, Dr. Larry Oye, head of the Health Science Center, came to the LSU Foundation and our Real Estate Facilities Foundation, which is now 3 years old. I was the original chairman and one of the founders, and Rob has taken over as chairman, but to talk about charity. Charity has, at that time, had been vacant for, gosh, almost 11 or 12 years, and it was not an asset that LSU had as part of their strategic plan to move forward with. They asked us if we would help them get that property, find out what its highest and best use is, and get it to the market. We took the project on and came up with a fairly robust approach to it because of the significance of this building historically, and particularly the significance of this building to the city of New Orleans. I know firsthand, there's a board member or two sitting here that was born at Charity Hospital. So that in itself makes it, and so many New Orleanians have. We initially decided to hire the Urban Land Institute, the premier group as it relates to land use, and we did, and we brought them in November. That was after getting approval by this board in September of 2017 with an intent to lease, essentially giving the Real Estate Facilities Foundation the rights intend to lease this building. And we, at that time, disclosed everything we were going to do. We hired ULI. They came in November of 2017, a little over a year ago. 10 experts in the real estate world. These panels, these advisory service panels, are the panelists themselves are volunteers. I've actually been on one or two myself over the years, other cities, but these were people from all over the country, experts in real estate. They came in, they spent 5 days in New Orleans. They interviewed over 80 major stakeholders in New Orleans to talk about what they thought about charity. So it was a very open and transparent process. At the end of the week that they were here, they issued their report verbally, and we got the written report in about a year ago, January of last year. They recommended two things. They basically told us what this building could be used for and what it probably will never be used for, in their opinion. And they also gave us a process to follow. That process involved two committees, a charity hospital project management committee, and a separate committee on the spirit of charity, basically talking about the entire charity district and what needed to be done on the district. We've worked very closely. These two committees have worked very closely together. So with that, we moved ahead with the RFQ and RFP process as recommended by ULI. And to do that, we hired Jones Lang LaSalle. They are probably the premier organization, one of the premier real estate organizations in the world, but particularly in working on public-private projects, they have an expertise there that we thought was very important to get it to the process. Working with Jones Lang LaSalle, we did an RFQ requesting qualifications. We had 5 or 6 people that responded to that. The Charity Hospital Project Management Committee, which was made up of stakeholders all throughout LSU, as well as the state. Commissioner of Administration Jay Darden was on that committee. So we wanted the state at the table. We wanted LSU at the table, senior officials of LSU, as well as members of the Real Estate Facilities Foundation. So it was a broad-based group. The RFQ, the RFP had 3 finalists that we selected, and they submitted in their RFP. Ultimately, 2 of those 3 made submittals, and Charity Hospital Committee, rigorous process, many meetings, ultimately selected 1532 Tulane Partners to be to do an intent to lease with, or essentially an option agreement with them to go to the next level. So that's where we are. We are at the stage of approving that 1532 partners and the agreement that we've negotiated with them. They will have 180 days plus 2 option periods of 90 days apiece to get their deal put together. And ultimately, at that point in time, we'll come back to this board for hopefully final approval of what will be a successful redevelopment of Charity Hospital. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the folks at JLL. They've got a brief presentation in terms of the process that they went through, just so you understand exactly what we went through to select this particular partner.
Thanks, Jimmy. Hi, I'm Chris Roth with JLL. This is Brian Carroll. We've been with the project since the beginning. We interviewed with the Real Estate and Facilities Foundation and were selected. I think it's important to note for 2 things. 1 is objectivity, and 2 is transparency. I personally have been working in federal, state, and local. State includes higher education procurements for about 20 years. Some of what we have to show you today simply, you can go on, simply details a lot of what Jimmy and Rob have spoken to. The ULI study was very important. Not only did it interview a lot of people and reach out, but it gathered a lot of information and set some scenarios that may be financially feasible to bring charity into commerce. We provided that to all respondents as they tried to qualify themselves and as they were part of the competition. This is a flow chart that you see there, but what it tells you is we went to the market nationally, internationally in some cases. We qualified firms. Those firms then advanced and submitted proposals to us. The board was able to see the down-selected firms in face-to-face interviews. And then we, of course, ran a best and final because competition is important. We wanted to get the best situation and transaction that we could for the Real Estate and Facilities Foundation. The bottom layer right there is where we are today. We've spent the last about 4 months working and developing the pre-development agreement. I would characterize it as building trust. As many of you know, the charity project had been out in the market before, so this was kind of the second time out. Things were different this time. One thing, we were involved and we ran this process very rigorously and marketed it like we would any public or private process. With respect to transparency, and Brian can add a bit to this, but I can tell you all from my experience doing both federal and private procurements, I haven't seen anything as transparent as this procurement. We actually completed press releases and distributed components of proposers' submitted documents to the public on several occasions. Next slide, please. Joe Stebbins from 1532 will go into this with a bit more detail, but what I wanted to point out is a couple things. One, Tulane University is an anchor tenant with office space and also very interested in some components of the housing for their students. Without looking at the eye chart text here, two things that aren't there are also very important. One of the very complicating factors of this procurement was City Hall and the Sewerage and Water Board. Those are not in the scope of the selected offerer. They were seen as too complicated, and JLL agreed with that and made our recommendations to the board to select 1532. With that, I'll turn it over to Brian on some detail on where we are with the pre-development agreement.
So there's a lot of information on the next couple slides. I'm not going to go through all of it. I'll just point out a couple of key components here. As Jimmy mentioned, effectively what will occur over the next 6 to 12 months is allowing the developer to go through a pre-development period that will allow them to do the due diligence that's required on a $250 million investment. And so over the next 6 months, they'll go through and do environmental work, studies, secure tenancy, and generally get the development in place, securing funding, all of those sorts of things. After that 6-month period, they can do one of two things. They can either close the pre-development period, sign the ground lease, and move into development, or they have 2 additional 3-month extension options, both of which come with deposits. At that point, they're non-refundable. So over that 12-month period, that's going to be their task, is to move through the pre-development of the building. A couple of key final lease terms here. Again, 99-year ground lease, which will be negotiated during the pre-development agreement. That will come with $250,000 a year in annual rent and an $11.85 million upfront capitalized lease payment at the outset of the ground lease signature. And finally, for approvals, again, we're not asking for approval of a ground lease today. That has yet to be negotiated. We're simply looking to advance the pre-development agreement, which will govern the time period between now and when the ground lease is signed. And with that, I'd like to throw it over to Joseph Stebbins. He's a representative from 1532 Tulane Partners, who will talk about their actions over the next 12 months.
First off, I'd like to thank the board for being the selection in this process. We're very proud to have gone through the process and been selected. We're very committed to this whole process, very committed to the community. In our proposal, we have public outreach meetings scheduled. Our schedule's a little off from the original submittal because of the process of going through this, which is fine. I agree it needs to be an open process. We intend to move very quickly. Actually, we're going to be in the building next week, starting environmentals, starting through due diligence as far as title work, which, given that the building's been there since the 1930s, and before that it's been a hospital site since the 1850s, we're sure that there's going to be some interesting title work to be done. That being said, we're also committed to try and get this process moved as quickly as possible to get the building back into commerce and get the area moving. We've met with Greater New Orleans Foundation, who helmed the Spirit of Charity. We're working with them to keep the communication lines open. and to keep the partnership that we have with you guys moving and keep everybody informed of what's going on. Obviously, it's important to the city, it's important to the LSU community and the whole region to get this done and moving and back into commerce. If anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Any questions from members of the committee or the board?
I would ask this question, Mr. Moran, if you could maybe just share with us a little bit, as you looked at all the proposals, kind of what, how the choices kind of stood out and what led.
It's a really good question. For those of you who don't know, I've been a real estate developer here in the state for 45 years, so I've built a lot of large projects myself all around the state of Louisiana. And and I've been evaluated a lot of times about projects particularly that touch the public. So the most important things, one of the reasons we like this team, a couple of reasons. Number one, Joseph is from New Orleans, has been there, has operated both in the public and private sector for a long time. His firm has a good reputation. Secondly, capital, the money it takes to do a $250 million project. We had to sit down and really kind of qualify that, assuming that they were able to get their deal put together, did they have the capital sources available? His financial partner is very strong, extremely strong, and someone who invests in these types of historic buildings. He's done them pretty much all over the country. So, so we were impressed with that. I think the third thing that buildings like this get built because they're historic. There's going to be historic tax credits. There's the new Opportunity Zone tax law that just passed last year. So there's some tax benefits that developers get when they renovate or redo a historic building. But there's real equity going into this building. There's real money out of the developer's pocket equity going into that. And that was probably one of the most compelling reasons to select them. They've got the capital sources on one end. On the other end, they're not trying to build this and do this with just strictly funny money, but they're trying to do it with real equity. And they had the most compelling argument. Their argument was not, TIF legislation is a very controversial thing, particularly in the city of New Orleans right now, and they basically came forward and said we're not going to use tax increment financing. It's a very sensitive issue in New Orleans right now. Secondly, their approach to the bill, and there was no dependency. You know, we had another proposal that said that we got to get City Hall to move into the Charity Hospital building. These guys said we're not going to have any tenant contingencies. So, and quite frankly, that's not where we're going. They have since then made a deal with Tulane, which Tulane University has announced to take about a third of this building. That's a huge anchor, particularly since Tulane is right across the street. So we've been impressed with the kind of tenants that they've come up with. Whether City Hall comes forward or not is not really, quite frankly, is not really a contingency here. So we love their leasing plan. It's going to be a mixed-use project. It's going to have residential and office. Tulane's going to do both residential and office in the building, and there will be others. Some retail down on the bottom end, badly needed in the medical district right now. There is no decent retail in that. So their overall plan was also most consistent with what the Urban Land Institute told us that this building should be. So bottom line is they were the clear winner. And by the way, they won the vote unanimously of the committee. So they were the clear winner in the clubhouse.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Any members of the board? Mr. Chairman, let me make a quick statement. First of all, LSU remains committed to robust public input on the Charity Hospital development in New Orleans. As chair of the Facilities Committee, we will convene another meeting February 15th in the city of New Orleans. And I want to take time to thank Ms. Hayes for making the effort to come up here and speak today. But we will be bringing another meeting to the city of New Orleans on February 15th, and I'm asking my fellow committee members to attend that meeting. I am pleased to say that the development team 1532 Partners, LLC, has already outlined a robust public input process in their submission to the Real Estate Facilities Foundation. And this public input process is scheduled to take place as part of their development rollout now that we have a pre-development agreement in place. LSU will hold the selected developers accountable to execute that public process and expect they will announce the details of that process soon. During the Spirit of Charity Innovation District process, led by the Greater New Orleans Foundation, 3 public meetings took place in New Orleans, July 25th, August 13th, August 28th, where citizens participated in facilitated discussions and working meetings to provide feedback to the development district of the Spirit of Charity District. While those meetings weren't focused on the charity building itself, because the public was very interested in giving feedback on that topic, at each of those 3 public meetings, there was a section of the program dedicated specifically to allowing the public to give feedback on the future redevelopment of Charity Hospital. In all 3 of those meetings, that did take place. Representatives from LSU Ref and 1532 Partners attended all 3 meetings of the Spirit of Charity Innovation District public meetings in New Orleans, and that they heard from the public and took those thoughts and recommendations firsthand. I know personally that Rob Stewart from the Ref attended many of those meetings himself, and I want to acknowledge his leadership on this as well as that of Jimmy Moran from the Ref. I think they've done a great job and have a tremendous track record in developing properties in and around New Orleans and throughout the state on behalf of LSU. They have worked incredibly hard to bring this project to life, starting with the Urban Land Institute design process back in 2017. That really kicked this whole thing off. That public process also concluded with a public meeting in November of 2017. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm just trying to highlight several things that took place over the process getting to today. One of the things that really excited me about this particular development team is that they committed to the City of New Orleans DBE program. I know that's important to you, Chair, and this board, and we've had much discussion on that as it relates to LSU as we leverage the power of the university to make a positive impact on communities where LSU has a presence, and certainly this charity project is a major part of that. And this developer has committed to do that 35% DBU requirement from a construction standpoint. We'll have some DBE equity in the project as well. I know the developers are working on that, and they'll come forward with additional information as we move through the process. And on a personal note, Mr. Chair, I actually was one of those board members who were born in Charity Hospital along with six of my siblings, so it's personal to me. I understand how important that is to members of the New Orleans community and how important it is, quite frankly, to the state. And I'm firmly convinced that this developer understands that, the sensitivity of it, and I think they're committed, and we're looking forward to moving forward with them. And with that, if they're...
Well, I would like to make one quick comment.
Yeah.
Coming in late as a board member on this project, I can't look enough at Jimmy Moran and his expertise, and Jimmy and I go way back and been friends a long time before I even ever was thought of about this board, I can tell you that. Just our connection through LSU. But I tell you, his expertise in this arena is second to none, and his confidence in the group certainly makes it very easy for me to support this 100%. Jimmy, we thank you for your help and dedication for this project and for LSU. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any other comment? Any board members?
I would just one
Blake?
question. Yeah, I would. Well, I
Just
would
one
echo
other comment, one other little tidbit of information. In talking to the Urban Land Institute, they didn't have this in their report, but I've kept in touch with them. I'm a member, a governor of the Urban Land Institute. They tell me they think this is the largest historic building in America that is sitting vacant. It's 1 million square feet. It is the largest historic building in America that is sitting vacant. And I guess I make that point in the sense that this is not just a New Orleans project, it's not just a Louisiana project. This thing has, the money that's coming to this project is coming internationally. It is a national figure, particularly by getting ULI involved. And so a lot of eyes on us, quite frankly, in terms of repurposing charity. And I think it's probably one of the most important, quite frankly, in my 45-year career, it's one of the most important buildings that I've ever had anything to do with. And that's why we have taken the care that we have. And we've got a great partner. I think he's going to be successful. I think he's going to keep us informed. And I believe the public process, now that because all we're really doing now is selecting that partner. Once that partner is selected, then the public process will begin again with their leadership, working with the Board of Supervisors and with the Real Estate Facilities Foundation.
Correct.
And I think you're going to be impressed with the way they go about their business.
Good, thank you. Blake?
Well, one, I would just echo Jimmy, thank you, and Rob, thank you all both for your efforts here. So we would be in a pre-development or due diligence phase, then just thinking long next steps. Then a lease would come back for approval here at the board. And then assuming we get to that point, what's the time frame on development that we would be looking at to put the building back into commerce?
Well, one of the things we have staring at us is this opportunity zone legislation that has got tremendous tax benefits for essentially rolling capital gains in. There's a 2016 deadline for a 7-year threshold that you have to meet. And I don't want to, I'll put everybody to sleep if we go into the mechanics of it. But to meet that deadline, we have to be underway in some form or fashion productively by the end of this year. Okay. So the group's been very helpful in trying to work with us to craft this pre-development agreement so that we can get this underway and get this project moving and start with substantial work by the end of the year. We're going to move through title, the standard due diligence you're going to do with any real estate transaction. We're also going to be working on plans and specifications for the exterior of the building, windows, working with the State Historic Preservation Office. We've already had them out for a number of meetings. They're very enthusiastic about it. We've done other buildings with their input very successfully. We're going to also work with asbestos abatement and the environmental issues of the building. Of course, everybody knows it's an old building. There were a lot of things that are probably lurking in the wings as far as that goes. So we're going to get through that whole process so that the first step will be most likely asbestos abatement, interior cleanup and demolition of hardscape that was left from the cleanup that was done previously, and then we're going to move through plans and specifications, particularly as far as historic portions of the building. SHPO has identified a number of them, and LSU also wants to chime in on some. I know you guys have some meetings that are going to be going on about that. So we can do a very sensitive protection of those areas and restoration.
So if you get started by the end of the year, when do you think you'll begin to open this building up?
We have the construction schedule's 20 months, currently budgeted at $200 million. That means that we'll be spending $10 million a month. It's a pretty aggressive schedule. My contractor's already kind of, Alan's taking a big gulp and he's rolling up his sleeves and getting ready to do it. That means essentially when we get underway, we'll be moving about $330,000 a day of work in that building. It has to be in place and acceptable. One of the reasons we've chosen to, as much as possible, make it a union job. We want to try and train as many people as we can. My goal, personally, as an Orleanian, is to not create jobs. I want to create careers. It doesn't do any good just to give somebody a job, because what do you do when this job ends? And but if I can get them trained, we're working with the AFL-CIO to get training programs in place, because when we're finished, because we're going to finish, where do you go from there? Well, you can go to a union. Union's got jobs if you want to become a licensed master electrician or whatever. That's really one of my chief goals, because that makes long-term significant impact at the city that does, to me, the most good. I mean, it's great to have the big project, but it's one thing. You need to make the series. You need to start the ball rolling.
Thank you. Any further questions? Remy?
I was going to make a motion. Can I ask a quick?
Yes.
We talked about, and I appreciate what Chairman Woods said about the
having a rollout. I know that the next phase of this has a public input portion. I think it would be helpful for the community if, when we convene our property and facilities meeting in New Orleans on February 15th, if we could at least have an idea of a schedule for the public rollout, for the rollout of the public input part of it. I think that'd be helpful information to include in that, our next committee meeting in February.
And that's not a problem. We already have kind of a framework. It's not on this particular schedule, but we can easily adapt it. One of the other things I would like to do is at that meeting, I'm going to get with the contractor, I'm going to put him on the thing, but I would also, I want to get him there with, with the AFL-CIO, so we can start getting people in to get training, because we're going to need everybody. It's going to be an all hands on deck thing. There's a lot of work to do. So
One thing too, obviously, quite frankly, these guys weren't selected until a couple of months ago, and they're not the developer of this building until this vote occurs. And I know this organization, they're great. I think you're going to begin to, then and only then will they come to the surface, because obviously they've been competing on this. So I think even before your February the 15th meeting, you're going to see a good bit of public stuff that's going to start coming out of these guys now that they're in control of the deal and of the building. So, and we'll work closely, the Real Estate Foundation will work closely with them, but I don't think you're going to be disappointed with the public process between now and the time they go hard on this deal.
Yeah, it seems like all those pieces in place. I don't doubt that for a minute. And I do think it would be helpful, if to the extent we can, to be able to outline specifically for the community, to the extent we can, the opportunities for that public input when we convene next month.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
And I also think, Mr. Chair, that, and I failed to mention it in my statement, there's a robust component that deals with low to mod income housing that we know is very important to the mayor and city leaders, as well as a component to bring, work with the city's workforce development agency to bring labor into the project from habitually unemployed folks. So it's a tremendous opportunity, again, leveraging LSU's leadership to make a positive impact in the community. So thank you very much. We look forward to working with you. At this time, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the resolution as presented.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to approve item number 4 on the committee's agenda and authorize a request from the LSU Real Estate Facilities Foundation to find an acceptable university purpose for a pre-development agreement with 1532 Tulane Partners Incorporated for the Charity Hospital Redevelopment Project Center.
Thank you, Mr. Storms. Second?
I'll second that motion.
Second by Mr. Chatelain. Without objection, the motion is adopted. At this time, I will accept the motion to conclude the Properties and Facilities Committee meeting. Moved. Second.
Second.
Mr. Chair, our business is finished for the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Woods. At this time, we will recess for lunch. The time is 12:23. We will reconvene at 1 p.m. 1 p.m.